Hey, Metal Dave Glessner with you here on another episode of the Talk Louder podcast. I'm joined, as always, by my co-host, Jason McMaster. What's up, Jason?
Howdy, how's everybody doing?
Jason, I heard you were recently interviewed for a documentary. I should set this up a little bit. There is a documentary being filmed here in Austin about a legendary music venue that I believe stayed open for about 30 years. It was called The Back Room. It's got a long history. Anyone that's lived in Austin or even in Texas may be familiar with the Back Room. Any touring bands that came through Austin, Texas may have played the Back Room. It's got a very rich history. A lot of big names played there before they were big names. But anyway, I'm told they interviewed you. Tell me what that was all about.
I was honored to be interviewed. Kind of helped put that place on the map, I guess, is why they wanted to talk to me.
Yeah.
I'd say it was an institution, that club, the Back Room.
Sure.
And I saw Nazareth and Cheap Trick and the Ramones, and then later on, you play. Back Room was the place you played on your way up and your way down.
Yeah.
Right. It
Yeah.
was the
Exactly.
medium to small, middle of the road, sneaky ass bar that everybody played in. Anyway, the interview was this cool. The movie is called, I'm probably going to get this wrong, Bloody and Bruised: The Story of the Back Room or something like that.
Yeah.
And the crew was really cool. They shot my segment in a bar that's been there forever, on Airport Boulevard, the old Airport Boulevard near the highway, near 35 off Koenig Lane, if people know Austin. A place called Barflies. And, bars are not really open right now. And, half capacity in this place, Barflies, would be like 5 people. It's small. It's a pub, right? I'm kidding,
Yeah.
but I'm not kidding. And it was so cold in there. I guess they're not running the heat, and we're in the middle of January right now. It's a little chilly, and we're looking at some cold temperatures this weekend. Anyway, it was cold. So when you see this film, when I watch it, the only thing I'm going to be thinking is, oh my God, it's so cold. I mean, I was crossing my legs and trying to look good on camera, and I didn't want to be a wuss and say, "Can you turn the heat on in this place?" You know what? I think that they, the owners offered that place up for a location free of charge, and I don't know what the rules were. Anyway, it was cool. They had good questions, just asking about history and things like that, and it was
Yeah.
awesome. And Pariah came up, Jared's band, and we talked about that and Sims and just the relevance of it all, the whole thing.
Yeah.
How bands were discovered there, bands were bouncing out of there. It was kind of a place for bands to do production rehearsal early in their tours and things like that. So
Yeah.
I think it's going to be pretty good, and it's done with pro cameras, and they had good questions, and that's kind of the real meat.
Yeah. And for people that don't know, your band Dangerous Toys, correct me if I'm wrong, was more or less discovered at that venue, or at least your
That's
performance
correct.
there, yeah, led to your recording contract, and the rest is history, which is why they probably wanted to interview you. Dangerous Toys being one of the big draws at the Back Room in the late '80s, early '90s.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Just a cool thing, just another reason that Austin is cool, and without trying too hard to be cool. I don't think that they should have ever put that sign up at the airport, live music capital of the world. We didn't need that. Everyone who knew
Yeah.
Austin was cool, they knew Austin was cool because they've been here before. All they got
Yeah.
to do is read an article in Rolling Stone about Austin. I don't
Yeah.
know what the city was so worried about when they did that. Uh, but anyway, let's move into our the meat of our show. Talk louder.
We were going to talk today about live albums, something that you and I have discussed in the past, and some of our listeners won't be surprised by some of the choices, but I'd be willing to bet that we'll either surprise them with one or two titles and or artist, or will at least remind them of a live album they forgot about or have forgotten the significance of. So, um, I should also say that you and I, we could do an entire show on Kiss Alive and Kiss Alive 2, and we probably will at some point. So, uh, no disrespect to Kiss, but I want this segment to get a little deeper and beyond some of the obvious. So with that in mind, we'll save Kiss for later discussion, and give me some of your other albums that rank up there, live albums that are high up in your collection.
Well, let's let's just start with I'll just do one and then you can do one. Yeah, how about that? Good.
Perfect.
Let's
Perfect.
start with Judas Priest. I'm wearing the shirt, so we should start with Judas Priest. Unleashed in the East.
Yes,
I
yes.
don't have my notes with me right now, but I believe that record came out in like '78, and it was after they had some really good success in Japan. They were definitely starting to kill it in America. They had done tours. I think their first tour in America was with Foreigner and Bachman Turner Overdrive or something like that.
Wow.
And it was
Yeah.
probably in smaller theater type venues, and not necessarily um, arenas yet,
Yeah.
BTO being from Canada, Foreigner being, I think, like a mix up of English and American. But
Yeah.
I hear that I'm reading Halford's book still, and so I've got a little bit of info there. It was one of those things where they probably played 25 minutes at that show and on that tour and never got any love, barely enough room to set up their gear, probably got screwed out of sound check. And those of us who've toured before in support, uh, that's normal. So it's good to see not a whole lot has changed. But back
Yeah.
to Japan. They did 2 nights in Japan and they recorded the 2 nights in Japan. And I know for a fact that Rob was not happy with his. It doesn't matter where I start about what this record means to me or the little factoids, right? But Rob was
Yeah.
unhappy with his performance and he was worried about it. But it wasn't until later that he actually had the chance to listen to it. They recorded those shows and then the tapes were sent off to maybe Tom Allen, who ended up producing a bunch of their records.
Yeah.
Like I said, my facts are not quite there yet as far as memorization. The idea of this album totally um, introduced me to a lot of Judas Priest material before I heard it. I want to
Yeah.
say that it was released in '79. I was just my fact checker just sent me. Released
Yeah.
in September of '79, Unleashed in the East by Judas Priest. 2 nights in Tokyo in February of the same year. That's pretty quick.
Yeah.
I mean, a live album to chart, and I was right. It was Tom Allen, and they had Les Binks on it. And Les Binks had just done Stained Class.
Yes.
Just done Stained Class, and it was the first record, I believe, with Les Binks. And he's the one that introduced the double kick stuff to them as much as Sin After Sin, an earlier record, had some double kick on it. That was studio session drummer Simon Phillips,
Yeah.
who
Yeah.
that's we can go crazy on stuff like that.
Right.
Let's get back to the live album. That album reads like a greatest hits to me.
Yeah. It does.
It blew my mind. My younger brother Randy turned me on to it, and it was a brand new record when he turned me on to it. So I went backwards from there. I think I got Sad Wings of Destiny right after that, and then I got Stained Class, and then nothing from Rockarola is on the record.
Yeah.
Hellbent for Leather was brand new, and Les Binks plays on that too. So if I
Yeah.
crossed my info there, I apologize. But So it was made up of Sad Wings, some of Sin After Sin, some of Stained Class, and some of Hellbent for Leather.
Yeah.
And
That's not a
to
bad
finish
mix.
where Rob Halford came back in and recut his vocals when they were going to take a look at the tapes, at the mixes. He was like, "This is terrible. I can't let this record come out." And no one knew that it was not 100% live. All of the instruments are apparently live. They just
Yeah.
recorded over his vocal tracks, and he talks about it in his book. So I guess it's okay for us to talk about that. He
Wow.
re-recorded. Yeah, he
Yeah.
solidified his fears when he heard the tapes, and he was like, "We can't put this out." He just went into the next room with a microphone and like just killed it. And like he made it in the book. Of course, he made it sound like it was one take and it was a magical moment. Obviously, a magical moment because the vocals on that record, it's one vocal track all the way through. There's no doubles. He may have punched in. He didn't go into details like that.
Yeah.
Incredible,
Yeah.
incredible.
Yeah.
And the record, the songs are faster and
Yeah.
meaner. It's actually, I prefer to hear some of those versions way more than the studio versions of a lot of those songs. What is
Yeah.
your take on that record? Where were you?
It also was an early acquisition for me as far as Judas Priest goes, because I was one of those guys where if I wasn't familiar with a band, I would usually start with their live album or a greatest hits compilation, because my reasoning was that would be a good snapshot of their best material. And if I liked it, then I would, go back into the catalog and buy the rest of the records. Steel was my first Judas Priest album, but Unleashed in the East came there quickly after. And like you said, it drew me back to all the other albums. I thought the performance was incredible. I mean, it was just so metal. I mean, the songs were, like you said, faster, furious. The vocal performance is insane. It just sort of captured the excitement of a live performance. And so I was going to ask you, actually, I have, side note here, I have a vinyl copy of that hanging on the wall here in my man cave, music room, home office, whatever you want to call it, that is autographed by Rob Halford and later autographed by Ian Hill. So um, yeah, pretty proud of
Beautiful.
that. Has nothing to do with the music itself, but it is a great album. It's one of my favorites from Priest. And the age-old argument, I guess, with that record is there's people that wish it was a double album. And I'm going to say I'm happy enough with it being a single album, because I'm one of those guys that I won't disagree with a double album, but I'm also fine with wanting more, the old adage of leave them wanting more. And so I think it works fine as a single album. It gets in, it punches you in the face, it gets out, and it leaves you going, "What just hit me? And can it please hit me again?" You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I'm fine with it being a single album. And the arguments of how much is live and how much is not, I don't really care. When I put it on and I listen to it, I get what I want out of it, and that's good enough for me. It's a great album.
Yeah. The significance of it, I think that the fact that you could actually hear your new favorite band, if you will, just as a sentence, right? Um, Live without seeing them yet was like giving you
Yeah.
a taste of the energy that the band had on stage.
And the
And they
imagery,
were,
the cover photo is amazing. I mean, the cover photo, you can practically listen to the cover photo, and that's another
yeah,
reason it's hanging on the wall, because it's a good
it's a
piece of art.
it's a staged photo.
Yeah, of
It's not taken
course.
from the show, because I have seen outtakes of it. And if
Yeah.
you notice, like I think it's Glenn might even be smiling. He's kind of like
Yeah.
doing a little like chuckle or something. It's candid in a way. And I also think it was, I mean, it was just hell bent for leather that I really believe they had started in their image with the leather clad and the spikes,
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
just a harder image because
Yeah.
of where their music was going and where they wanted to take it. Uh,
Yeah.
But you're
Classic
right. It's a
album.
Yeah, it's a perfect package.
Yeah.
There are tracks missing from that single album. I don't know if there was enough material to do a double live for it, but I know that
True.
Hellbent for Leather and Delivering the Goods had been omitted from the release because I've heard versions of those on the CD reissued version of that years later. So
Yeah.
there are some other tracks laying around. Um,
Yeah.
it's one of my favorites to this day. I have the cover framed somewhere as well. It's not hanging up, but it's framed, and
Yeah.
and if it's not, it should be. Uh, Amen to that. It's one of my favorite things in the world. That record,
Yeah.
in
It's
every way. Uh,
yeah.
uh, so your turn. What do you got?
Uh,
Live album.
well, I almost feel like I'm stealing this one from you,
No.
but I'm gonna go with AC/DC on Blood. You got it. I remember again, that was another case of I had already owned Back in Black, I owned Dirty Deeds, I owned For Those About to Rock, and then I think is about that time is when I picked up If You Want Blood. And two of the three albums I just named featured Brian Johnson. So I wasn't real familiar with the Bon Scott catalog yet. So I went to the live album thinking this will be a good, Cliff's Notes version, if you will, of the Bon Scott catalog. And once again, the album cover drew me in. The artwork with Angus getting stabbed through the SG, is just awesome to what was I, 13 years old or 14 or something.
Yeah.
So how could you not like that right away? And then you turn it over and he's dead on the drum riser on the back cover with the guitar neck sticking out of his back. So before I'm even into it, I'm loving it, right? And again, it was just raw. It captured sight with some of these live albums that we're talking about were my introduction to the live concert experience because I hadn't had one yet. So my imagination is running wild with what it must be like to be in that crowd and witnessing this. And the song again, it was amazing. It captured them at a period in their career when they were, they already had enough great material to put out a really strong live album. And yeah, and I wasn't let down at all. Some of the banter in between the songs was great. And then in hindsight, of course, after I collected the studio albums, I realized much like Unleashed in the East, on If You Want Blood, the studio tracks are played faster, meaner, rawer. Uh, it was another perfect package. Great album. I'm sure
It's
you have it in your collection somewhere.
Yeah, of course I do. I think that my first like band that I was playing out live with, ish, maybe my second band
Yeah.
to kind of we played I think the whole record. And so, we weren't an AC/DC tribute band. I had never heard of such a thing because, I was 16 years old or something when I'm playing, bass and trying to sing like Bon Scott. Um, you know, I think we played every song on that record
Yeah.
live, as best we could. I think some of them I wasn't good enough to play the songs yet,
Yeah.
and the I learned so much from just how hard it is to be that simple when you just want to play fast, and you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because it's all about pocket. I mean, that's a whole other subject, is about being able to play in the pocket, about
Right.
behind the beat and groove, like Led Zeppelin comes to mind, and so many things come to mind. But the record came out about a year before Unleashed in the East. If You Want Blood, You've Got It. It's interesting, the relation between the two records. They read like a greatest hits. And
Yeah.
I guess that's going to be the common denominator here in the show is all of these records read like greatest hits or
Sure.
volumes 1 and 2 greatest hits series kind of a thing. Um, the record, I just could sit here and put it up on a pedestal all day, but um, the wiki here, if I just glance down at it, what pops out to me is when you think about it, it's the only like official release on vinyl or whatever, a release by the record label that features a live set with Bon Scott.
Mm,
Later on, DVDs and the of course the theatrical release
let
of
there
Let
be
There Be
rock.
Rock the movie.
Yeah.
Um, those are live, and you could probably buy even live versions of those on vinyl and CD now. But it was the only show with Bon Scott. The live that this record was the only set recorded for release with Bon Scott, and it's just something I
Yeah.
never thought about.
Yeah.
Um, Especially now, years and years and years and years later, there's not another live album, that you can buy a record of with Bon Scott playing live. Not to
Yeah.
my knowledge. And
And
according
that
to
and that it's also another one much like Unleashed in the East where I'm okay with it being a single album. I think in the case of AC/DC, they might have actually been able to put out a double album as far as having the material, maybe not the budget or whatever. But again, I'm fine with it being a single album. It kicks me right in the face and it leaves me wanting more. And I think it's great, compact. There's something to be said about economy, Um, just because you have the space and the time and the material doesn't necessarily mean you should overdo it. So,
right.
uh, yeah, what else you got? Give us one that we might not suspect. Are there any live albums in your bag of tricks that wouldn't be as obvious to some of us that know you and your background?
Oh, I think that they're all gonna be quite obvious.
Yeah.
But here's one that I want to talk about for a little bit. Is Foghat Live.
Okay, there you go. That's not obvious.
Well, to me it is because people don't realize how many. I mean, there were a couple of years there where Foghat was killing it.
Yeah.
They had songs on the radio that were awesome.
Yeah.
Um, I just wish they would have played those damn live versions because once again, so much more energy and fire, and the tempos were up, and you could tell those guys were feeling twisted on stage. They were pumped
Yeah.
up, and they could tell you were feeding off. When you play live, you feed off the energy of the audience, and it
Sure.
makes your heart race, and their hearts are racing, and it's hunger. There's that
Yeah.
tribal thing in my brain. I start thinking, man, it's raw, and
Yeah.
you're feeling a bit crazed in a
Yeah.
positive way, because the
Yeah.
audience is feeding off of the band, and the band is feeding off of that, and it's cyclable,
Yeah.
and it can drive one mad with heavy metal happiness, you know.
Yeah.
Uh, the songs on there again, it is reading like a greatest hits. It
Yeah.
had Fool for the City, of course, Slow Ride. It had an extended version of Slow Ride with all kinds of feedback and controlled feedback and just, impromptu bass solos and breakdowns and stuff. The live version is usually, it's kind of like 100,000 years on Kiss Alive, which I probably shouldn't let any more cats out of the bag on that, but uh,
Yeah.
drum solo is like this monolithic thing that's happening on Kiss Alive that you think about. Well, that was part of their live show. Well, so was a 12-minute version of Slow Ride, um,
Yeah.
which makes me think about the running order on Foghat Live is probably still only going to be about 8 or 9 songs tops because it's a
Wow.
one album deal, you know,
Yeah. Yeah.
um, especially with extended versions of the some of the songs. and they're just
Yeah.
killing it. You know, the slide guitar playing and just those hit songs and the energy on those hit songs that you heard studio versions of on the radio all the time. I love Road Fever. They're an amazing like boogie woogie band,
Yeah.
and I always argue with myself. It's like, aren't they from England? They're an English band. Uh,
I, I think
you know,
they
I
are.
think they're an English band, and
Yeah.
I just sound American to me. It just sounds like everything that was happening in America at that time. When you think of like Grand Funk Railroad and stuff
Yeah.
like that, Foghat has that vibe, and
Yeah. Yeah.
all about blues and slide guitar, which is an American born thing that
Yeah.
obviously England and Europe did it better than we, and we kind of stole their hyped up version of it. And it was like a really friendly war that America and Europe had with, old American blues and making rock and roll out of it. You can go
Yeah.
to AC/DC for a second, same thing, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
These guys
Yeah.
wanted to play songs that had the energy of Tutti Frutti and Great Balls of Fire.
Yeah. Yeah.
Trying to do that. You just were doing it through Marshalls. And
Yeah.
you can't lose when you take the blues and just crank it the hell up. And if Lemmy were here, he would be like doing shots to that statement, you know.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Speaking of Lemmy, uh, No Sleep Till Hammersmith, got to
Oh
be
my
one of the
God.
great live albums ever.
Just for
That was the
everyone listening and watching, that segue was unplanned. It was perfect. No Sleep Till Hammersmith, dude. Tell me
you
about
served it up on a silver platter, so I'm gonna run with it. But yeah, No Sleep Till Hammersmith. That was actually again. In this case, it was the very first Motorhead album I'd ever heard in its entirety. And I got to credit my friend Danny Hoekstra. He's a guy I went to high school with in San Antonio. He turned me on to so many great albums, No Sleep Till Hammersmith being one of them. I remember being at his house and listening to it on vinyl, and just I had never heard anything like it before. And he loaned it to me, so I took it home and spent about a week or two with it on my turntable, and it just blew me away. It
it. Yeah.
was the heaviest, most vicious sounding thing I'd ever heard at that time. And Lemmy's voice, of course, is, one of a kind. And again, you just felt like you were choking on the smoke when you heard that record from being there. And crazy enough, that album went to #1 on the charts upon its release in England, which is
That's correct.
completely bizarre, you
Yeah.
know? But that was another one. Great packaging. The album cover caught my attention. The music blew me away. The music turned me into a fan. I started going back and collecting Motorhead albums because of that particular album. And I think history will prove that it stands up as like one of the all-time metal classic live albums.
It came out right around the same time as Ace of Spades.
Yeah,
It
it's
it
funny the
came out.
albums that we're
It says it
listing.
was released summer of '81.
I'm fine. I'm realizing as we're having this discussion that a lot of these albums, it is our age, I suppose. But a lot of the great live albums came out in that period of 75 to 79, 80, somewhere in there. And
Yeah.
yeah, I mean the ones that are classics. Here's another one that captured my attention when I was a youngster, young rebellious hoodluming. Ted Nugent, Double Live Gonzo. What a rip roaring
Oh,
album that is, man. Oh my
yeah.
God.
Yeah. And the cool thing is some of that was recorded in San Antonio,
It
Texas,
sure was. Yes, it
and
was.
that changes everything for you and I. It's like holy ground. I'm not quite sure what venue it would have been. Um,
Yeah, I want to
y-
say Municipal Auditorium, but it could have been Freeman Coliseum.
yeah.
Um, and the songs from Texas that weren't recorded in Antonio, there was also a handful of them that were recorded in Dallas. So it's very much a Texas album. Uh, from Ted Nugent, who of course is from Detroit. So interesting that he didn't record that album in, closer to home, say Cobo Arena or something like that. He chose to take the recordings from Texas, Dallas and San Antonio. Um, but that was an album that just destroyed me. I mean, talk about just a maniac captured on vinyl and making you feel like you were there. And some of that, I think, guitar playing was just unbelievable. That live version of Great White Buffalo just blows your head off. And then some of the, Ted, his between song banter, and some of it is so classic from that album. I mean, Nashville Pussy took their name from that album because of the banter in between songs that Ted Nugent was so famous for, rat-a-tat-tat, on the mic
Yeah.
in between songs. Uh, but yeah, talk about making you feel like you were there. You can almost feel him sweat just listening to that record. It's, like you said earlier, and like I said earlier, uh, it's rawer, it's meaner, it's faster. But that album is really precise too. Ted's guitar playing is unbelievably precise for as fast as they're chugging along on those songs. And the banter, I don't know how much of it he rehearsed, but even if you rehearsed anything that's that much of a tongue twister, you're going to screw it up once in a while. And he just rattles it off, no
Yeah,
problem. It's crazy.
he was kind of singing his raps, his in between
Yeah,
banter. He's almost singing, and Paul Stanley got pretty good at that too. But it was Paul Stanley is a little more. He's got a different attack, of course, than
yeah,
Ted. Ted was on. It was almost like he was a speed freak, but
yeah,
apparently he's drug free and has been forever, and
yeah,
that's great to keep
yeah.
that
You
energy.
wouldn't
I would
know it.
imagine so.
Yeah, you wouldn't know it from that banter. You would be, yeah, yeah, I don't know where that motor mouth comes from, but he really has a knack for it, and it really shines on Double Live Gonzo. And his playing really stands out to me on that album.
I agree.
And the song titles,
I think everybody really plays their ass off on that record. I think
yeah,
all of the vocals. It's I'm just kind of looking at some stuff here. Cliff Davies on drums and backing vocals, Rob Grange on bass, and Derek St. Holmes, who was living in Dallas for a while and still might be living in Dallas. I don't know. I heard he's like the nicest guy when you meet him.
yeah,
He's legendary. He sang all the time on many records. And
yeah,
you think about Stranglehold, that's not Ted Nugent singing for
yeah,
everyone out there listening and watching this. That's Derek St. Holmes, and that's
yeah,
probably Ted's biggest hit. And it's an album
yeah,
track. That song's, I don't even know how long that song is, especially on Double Live Gonzo. It's long,
yeah,
which
even
goes
longer.
with what we've been talking about. The live versions are a treat because you get those breakdowns that are extended, and it is a double album. And it's amazing that everyone in the late '70s, early '80s were getting away with putting a live album out at all. Um, and I'm sure we're going to talk about this stuff before. I wanted to bring up Tom Werman was one of the producers on this, and he went on to produce, I
Wow.
think, Motley Crue and Kicks and I think
It's,
Junkyard. I think he did Junkyard. Um,
yeah,
but Rick Brody, who I think produced like the first Poison record, I could be wrong there. I swear that's who did
yeah.
first Poison
Look
record
what
was
the
Rick
cat
Brody.
dragged in.
Yeah,
Yeah,
he was probably an elder statesman even back then. Not that
yeah,
that means anything, but I mean, this record came out in, '78 or something. So he was
yeah.
probably just a young, oh, he produced Pariah. Tom Werman produced the Pariah record. Our producer of
Ah,
this
there
show,
you
Tom
go.
Loud, Jared, was in Pariah. He worked with Tom Werman. He probably had some stories he could actually add. Uh,
Yeah.
but here's a big one. There is an engineer that worked on Double Live Gonzo named Chet Hyams, who is from Austin, Texas. who I believe played in a band with Van Wilkes, for people here in Austin who know who Van Wilkes is, blues guitar, hangs out with Billy Gibbons all the time, bada, bada, bada.
Yeah.
Of history in Austin there, Chet Himes worked on Double Live Gonzo. And here's a freak out story. I was doing something with Chet Himes. There's been a couple of times I've been lucky enough to work with Chet, and I forget the name of his studio right now, but he had a gold or a platinum, I can't remember, sales award of Ted Nugent Double Live Gonzo hanging up on
Oh.
the wall in the studio with his name. And I'm looking at Chet, and I'm looking at that award, and I'm looking at Chet, and I'm going, what? Kind of a thing. And I'm like, he's like, yeah, I worked on that record. And I'm like, I'm not worthy. This is crazy.
Wow.
This is part of my childhood. And he's like, yeah, dude, it was fun just to be there and work on that. It just says that he was, one of the remote recorder personnels. So he was there helping them record that shit.
Wow.
Getting it on tape. That's a big deal.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well, if he's based in Texas, that might have something to do with some of the dates on the album being recorded in Texas. I don't know. Maybe there was a connection there.
Yeah, so Chet Himes just died this year, just died this year. It's just now 2020. He was 73. And this
Wow.
is an Austin American Statesman article that people can look up and read about it. I'm not going to read it, but it
Yeah.
says he died Saturday. So that would have just been
Oh,
a
wow.
week ago now, right? So it's crazy. And Chet was awesome. Well, I don't have to tell you how awesome he was.
Yeah.
He engineered a Double
Yeah.
Live Gonzo.
Listen to
And
Double
many,
Live
many more.
Gonzo.
He worked with Christopher Cross and many, many people. And obviously, he worked with hit makers. He worked with Jerry Jeff Walker, Carole King. Several albums he engineered are in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Well, that's a whole other story, too, because,
Yeah.
if part of me wants to say, fuck the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. But you know what? The fact that Chet worked on records that are worthy, amen to Chet. And it's sad
Yeah.
to see him go.
Yeah.
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 He actually recorded a Broken Teeth album, Dave. He recorded Blood on the Radio. He
Uh,
engineered our live
uh,
album, our first live album, Blood on the Radio.
I did not know that.
Pretty
Wow.
cool, right? I have
That's
full circle
awesome.
from Double Live Gonzo to Blood on the Radio. Amen to Chet. And
Yeah.
thank you
Amen
for
to
Jared
Chet.
for feeding us that intel. I for some reason I couldn't remember that.
Here's
Yeah,
one for you. Here's another one for you, and I'm sure you'll have some input on this. Saxon, The Eagle Has Landed. Great live album.
yeah.
Uh, that that's another one I owe to my pal Danny Hoekstra from San Antonio, our high school days. He might have turned me on to that the same day he turned me on to No Sleep Till Hammersmith, but I was familiar with Saxon because living in San Antonio, the great Joe Anthony, the DJ on 99.5 Kiss, he plays Saxon on the radio. So I was familiar with the band, knew some studio tracks, uh, but had not heard that album. And I listened to it, and again, interestingly enough, that album, the cover doesn't portray the live experience. It's just a stark black cover with the band's logo in like blood red, uh, which was visually appealing, but it was unlike some of the other albums we've talked about. But the photos on the back of that album, I remember turning it over, and there's that photo of Biff Byford. He's got one fist raised, and his hair is like in mid head bang, and it's like 8 feet long off the side of his head, and he's got the studded wristband that goes down to his elbow. And I was like, "Oh my God, dude, this just looks rock and roll," you know?
See that image that you just sort of painted right there is exactly what a young future headbanger wants to see. Whoa, what's going on here with this, this young
This looks
English
fun.
man? Yeah, with this young English man with a microphone in it. Obviously, it just looks loud. It looks
Yeah,
loud and it looks fiery, and it's an energy. And obviously, you can't wait to listen to the record when you see that kind of stuff. And
Yeah.
even though Unleashed in the East and If You Want Blood, You've Got It is a staged photo, those are staged photos because it's theatrical.
Yeah.
Uh, you can't wait to listen to that record.
Yeah. And when
And
you do, it's like uh again, the running order is great, the energy is cranked, in retrospect, after you collect all the Saxon albums, you realize at that point in time it was again a greatest hits package. I mean, let's face it, the point of putting out a live album is to sort of capture your best moments leading to that point, right?
right,
And so it only makes sense that you're going to highlight your best material at that time. But that album also, lots of energy, great playing, a lot of speed and fury. And interesting side note, and you may know this. Do you know the connection between that album and Nigel Glockler, the drummer?
it's his first record with the band.
That's
Was a live album.
Most people will, he his first studio album with the band was Power and the Glory, of
Right.
course, but he actually first appeared on an album on The Eagle Has Landed, which I
That's right.
believe was the Denim and Leather tour, because
You
I
are
think he
correct.
joined them in time for the Denim and Leather tour. But again, a great album. It came out at a time when I'm discovering, the Iron Maidens and the Judas Priests and the Motorheads and bands like that, and Saxon fit right in there, of course. And the performance and the delivery of that album never gets old. It's another classic live album, in my
I,
opinion.
I met Saxon and Nigel only 2 months before this record came out. I met
All
him in
right.
Austin in March of '82, and this record came out. Or I'm sorry, it was recorded actually. I'm sorry, in '81 and part of '82. So
Yeah.
the end of '81 and parts of '82.
Yeah.
So uh, kind of just an interesting factoid about these things that we're sort of like recalling and picking up and things like that. I think that we're about due for our outros here.
Yeah, I was gonna
I
say
I
we're
love
running a
that.
little long.
Yeah, that's okay. I wanna just say this. I love this show that we're doing here.
Yeah.
Of these live records, because you surprised me. Just for everyone listening, we don't really plan this. We'll pick a loose topic. Okay,
Yeah.
live albums go, right?
Yeah.
There's a
Exactly.
little bit more of an obvious one. I didn't plan on talking about Foghat. I didn't know you were going to bring up Eagle Has Landed. I love it. This is
Yeah.
I could talk about this kind of stuff for 1,000 years, and we will.
Yeah. My shot of rock to you is uh, we've been friends now for 25 years, ever since I moved to Austin, at least, and that's 25 years. What I was going to ask you is, do you remember the very first time we met?
Um, yes, I do. It, it when you say that out loud, I have to kind of go through a mental Rolodex kind of a thing
Yeah.
because it's just that way with me. But it wasn't even in Austin or San Antonio that we actually met. We actually met in Corpus Christi around the holidays. Um,
Correct.
tell me what year that was?
Uh, I remember the Black Album by Metallica was brand new, so I'm going to say it was 90, 91, somewhere right in there.
Probably Christmas '90.
I was going to say Thanksgiving, but you're
Yeah,
right. It's the holiday season in 90 or 91. We're in Corpus Christi. What else do you
yeah,
remember about that?
probably the end of '90. I don't remember. I had gone to a little rock bar called Zeros to meet up with some
Yes.
friends and realized there's a bunch of San Antonio, headbangers there that I knew, because Sith was playing. And
Scythe.
Scythe, right?
Yeah.
And when you think about just a holiday show in your hometown. I was down there to see my dad. I would go down there every holiday and just hang with my dad for a day or two, right? And
Yeah.
I just went out to the rock bar, and there you guys were, and I ended up going back to the hotel just to hang out with you dudes for a little while, and there you were. I didn't remember meeting you at the bar itself, but yeah, that
Yeah.
was it.
Well,
Uh,
I remember, so I'll add to that story. So I'm I'm at this club Zeros with my friends from San Antonio who are in this band, this speed metal, heavy metal, thrash metal band, whatever you want to call it, called Scythe. And Scythe is on stage. I'm standing in the crowd watching my friends rock out. I get this tap on my shoulder. I turn around. I'm wearing a black leather Motorhead jacket. And I turn around to see who's tapping on my shoulder. It's you. And you point at my jacket and you something like, nice jacket, dude. Because, of course, we can't hear anything. The band is just raging. And I'm like sitting there, like, oh my God, it's the guy from Dangerous Toys. And I don't know you at this time. Right? And I have no idea that you're originally from Corpus Christi, and I don't know anything except you're the guy from Dangerous Toys who I've seen on MTV, and you're tapping me on the shoulder at this hole in the wall in Corpus Christi, commenting me on my jacket. So when the band finally quiets down or leaves the stage or whatever, I pick up the conversation with you. And again, you said something about my jacket, and I told you a friend of mine painted it, and we got to talking a little bit. And I said, me and the band and a few other guys have a couple hotel rooms down the street. You're welcome to come back and join us if you want. I didn't know anything about you at the time, and I was, trying to bait you with the fact that we had two bathtubs full of beer, and I was like, whatever, we got to get this guy to come back to the hotel and hang out with us. Because I'm all stoked that you're the guy from Dangerous Toys, and my buddies are all stoked that you're the guy from Watchtower, right?
right, right, right. Well, we were all young, and you were ready to play Party Marty.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
wanted to
exactly.
stay up late, drink beers with your friends, and talk about rock and roll.
And you
So
did, and you were gracious enough to join us. And my friends were, impressed that you came back. You were at their show. You came back and spent some time with us, and that was our very first meeting. And I'll never forget it. And it probably wouldn't have happened if I wasn't wearing a Motorhead jacket. So thank you to Lemmy and the boys.
it's possible, but I always it goes back to you look for when you don't know anybody, because when you're just kind of hanging out, what is it that you look for when you want to celebrate what you're in love with, and that be rock and roll, and those
Yeah,
things pop out. Those things, I have to say something to this guy about his jacket because it's
yeah,
brilliant
yeah,
and it's
yeah.
freaking me out. I love this, and I'm not one to play shy when someone's got some kick-ass wares going on. I'm like, oh,
Right.
that's awesome. Just need to know that my opinion of that, I approve, whether I'm something or nothing. I approve.
Yeah.
My shot of rock to you is, what do you remember? For a lot of people don't realize that Metal Dave is a journalist on the side of having somewhat of a real job in a real life. He's a rock journalist, and has been lucky enough to interview like some of our idols. And what do you remember about interviewing Glenn Tipton of Judas Priest? Always wanted to hear you comment on that,
Ah,
whether it's
Glenn.
deep thoughts or not.
Yeah, Glenn Tipton, guitarist for Judas Priest. The thing I remember most, and it's weird. We've had this discussion before. Sometimes it's the sidebars that you remember the most. And the thing I remember the most about the interview with Glenn Tipton was he actually called me from a tour stop in Romania. And it's the first and only time I've conducted an interview over the phone from Texas to Romania.
Well, that's, I mean, if this is pre-cell phone, that phone bill was astronomical.
It
What
wasn't
year
my
was?
phone bill.
That's right. I know that. What year was that?
It was they were promoting the Nostradamus record, and they
Oh,
were
okay.
they were heading back to America to do the Metal Masters tour, which oddly enough, I ran into you at that show in San Antonio.
Yeah,
But
Heaven and Hell
um,
and Testament, maybe?
and Motorhead,
Yeah,
yeah,
that's right, that's right.
yeah.
Yep.
And so I'm talking to Glenn. He's calling from Romania. We're discussing the Nostradamus album, which was kind of an interesting topic because, as you know, that album is a pretty polarizing album among Judas Priest fans. But he raised a point that, uh, people tend to think of Judas Priest as all British steel, hellbent for leather, screaming for vengeance. But he pointed out that, if you take a look back at Point of Entry and Turbo, Priest was never afraid of taking chances, and Nostradamus was just another one of those rolls of the dice. And at the time, I remember the fans were very divided as to whether or not they liked it. But he did make that point. He also said that, they were going to add a few songs into the set from that album, but he mentioned that at some point in a year or two afterward, they had plans of coming back and doing that album in its entirety. And that never materialized. You could argue for better or worse, but that never did happen. And then just, the rest, I also asked him if at this late stage he ever got tired of going on stage in all the leather, it's like at 60 some years old, which was about his age at the time. Don't you wish you could just go on in jeans and a t-shirt? And he said, no. And he says, when we go on stage as Judas Priest, we've got to be the monster. We got to show up with the leather and the spikes because that that transforms us into the fighting unit that is Judas Priest. And I thought that was an interesting take coming from a guy who had, proven himself, had nothing left to prove, uh, and would probably be a lot more comfortable on stage in some chuckers and jeans and a t-shirt. But he was adamant that no, when we go on as Judas Priest, we wear the leather. And I thought that was really cool.
Well, they have to. It's kind of like no one wanted to see the Ramones without torn jeans, Chuck Taylors,
Yeah.
and leather jackets on, even if it's 110 degrees in Texas.
Yeah.
You always saw
He told
Ramones
me
with a leather jacket.
another another point I remember from that interview, he was in Romania, right? So he
Wow.
said he left the hotel and went next door, and there was a shop uh, next to the hotel that sold, t-shirts and records and things like that. And he walked in to take a look around, and obviously the store clerks and whatnot recognized him. And he said they didn't say anything to him, but all of a sudden, standing in there, and all of a sudden the music changes and they start playing Judas Priest. But they were playing deep cuts, and he said that they started playing "Delivering the Goods," and he thought he had a moment there where he was like, oh my God, we've really done some great material over the years. That was a deep cut and it wasn't something they played every night. And it sort of reminded him of just how much great material they had. And it was kind of interesting that it took a trip to Romania and a chance trip into this store when recognized him and reminded him of how great the back catalog was and how great the deep cuts were and things like that. So he was a really cool guy. Really, he
Awesome.
mentioned in closing, he mentioned that he loves to paint, loves to go fishing, very much an outdoor guy, and likes to play golf and tennis and stay. So uh, obviously, it was an honor to interview a guy who's one of the architects of the type of music you and I love. So
I think that I'm envious, and I wouldn't have known how to to come back with something after he's just being human, because you don't think about someone like Glenn Tipton, uh, uh, you know, uh, being having a moment where he's thinking, he doesn't walk around and go, yeah, I'm in Judas Priest and we're great and our material was awesome. He's not thinking
right,
that. He's not, that's the last thing on his mind. That's part of his job in Judas Priest, is to work on that. But you know,
yeah,
you're not asking him about that. He's telling you about it. And
yeah.
that's really cool.
That's the kind of stuff I try to dig up in interviews, and we'll talk more in the future about other ones. But I always try to find angle that allows me to get a piece of the human being besides the stage persona. So
Yeah.
that's where the interesting stuff comes from.
Yeah, I
All right,
agree.
I think we've done it for this episode. Jason, I will see you again the next time. Meanwhile, I'd like to thank everybody for tuning in. It's Metal Dave Glessner here, along with my co-host Jason McMaster. Thank you for listening to another episode of Talk Louder.